Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham. So anyway, we go with this routine of playing some background video, um, and this, talking over stuff. So just um, the garden as it fully extends in the local neighborhood anyway. That kind of stuff in the background. Um, just before I had made this video, one of the cats, when I didn't have a camera, the yellow cat, killed something. And I still can't tell what it was. I mean, he nailed it fast. I mean, it was about 40 or 50 feet away. But it wasn't small. I mean, it was like that big. And it wasn't a rabbit, and it wasn't a squirrel. And it didn't look like a rat either. So I don't know what the hell it was. But anyway, it's really quite grisly. And so when he was at the part where he has it, but it's not dead yet, I was going to intervene. And because I said, well, maybe there's a chance. But you're like, what am I doing? Because now it's injured, and then I have to do something about that. So you never know what to do. But anyway, then the thing, he put it down, and he let it try to escape, and then I could hear the bones of its head. It ate its head first, so it chewed his head, and you could hear the bones in its head cracking from 40 feet away. Anyway, and so I was just thinking, it's all just so fucking charming here on Earth. So, related to that, Glenos guy did a live room thing. So I did spend some time in there, an hour or two anyway, 2 hours maybe. He was a little bit late, so yeah, I was there for 2 hours. He wasn't. But anyway, so I haven't listened to the rest of it after I left, but I think I did my part for while I was in there. And so, I think it was pretty good. It's all antinatalists discussing antinatalism, so that was good. Well, one ethicist anyway. And I sort of made that point that I think the better argument is the argument against life, not just human life. I mean, humans don't even, besides the fact that humans can't even do being human very well, for humans to be human, you have to pay the horrible price of all of that biosphere, all of these animals that are doing whatever they're doing really bad, in the sense that they're not doing it bad on purpose, but I just mean the idea of having 2,000 children and only one of them survives. those are really bad ratios, and a lot of animals exist in that condition, and it's really bad. And that's the price of us existing, is them existing. So they're slaves, they're inefficient, horrible attrition is an imposition we impose, and that in itself is enough reason to say life doesn't work, and human life doesn't work. And that way it doesn't have to get personal either. You don't have to talk about how we as individuals fail, or we as a race fails, or we as a kind fail, because it's just that it's a game that nobody can do well. It's based on a wrong and stupid mechanism of pointless competition and an exaggerated notion of the value of winners versus the value of losers, and not recognizing that you just can't make too many losers and then say it's worth it. If too many people have to have cancer for you to have your fun, well, that's not good enough. And clearly I would argue if anybody has to have cancer so you can do your stupid living thing, you're not doing enough good stuff to justify it. Anyway, I've made the point. Make it again and again, I suppose. So, anyway, so that was interesting. There's something. And so there's been other things. So I brought up a couple of subjects that were on my mind about how to argue and the problems of attempting to oblige people to be reasonable, to use reasoning and not use, I wish it was a better world, or I hope we could do better, or, fantasy notions of, utopias that we'll never be able to achieve. And it's just not practical. Solutions that just won't work. The floating all boats kind of stuff that people should be able to acknowledge that they're never going to be able to do it good enough to justify it. So, anyway. So yeah, so I made some good arguments, I think. Points, whatever. So yeah, so there's been other stuff been running through my mind, and I did reference it vaguely or a little bit in the video, in the conversation with Glenos, is two kind of, Snake Plisskenus, just because I don't like all of his videos have these arguments from nature in them lately. That I first don't even agree with them, and that they're true about nature. And even if they were, what does that have to do with us? Because frankly, we're capable of, most of our natural impulses have been modified by our civilization. We go poo-poo in a bathroom, and we do lots of different things that have nothing to do with doing it naturally. So it's a silly argument to this argument from nature for anything. And then Logic rolls the dice, who's now whatever, Connor or Smonner or something. He is just he believes in some kind of psychic panism or panpsychism or some other kind of bullshit. Like there's some sort of energy or thing that we're connected to, and that's what makes us think or makes us understand, or does, and it's just impossible for me to understand how he goes from getting the idea of a material universe with mechanical functions and how human beings are just reflexive organisms that are navigating based on creating a simplistic model in the brain of things. Not an ideal model, not necessarily a rationally perfect model, not a technical model. It can be all of those things, but those aren't the models we generally use. We pigeonhole things, we categorize things for simplicity and ease of use. We turn all soap into soap. We don't worry about whether it's Dove or some other Irish Spring or whatever. We don't, soap is soap, kind of thing. And the brain does that with good and bad and fun and not fun and all that kind of stuff. So the categories are drawn hard and black and white and high contrast. The model isn't got all the nuance in it, because most of the nuance is sort of irrelevant to most conversations. Most conversations are talking about something for one part of its utility, not its entire what it is. Like soap is about, for most people, it's about getting clean, even though you could argue that soap is fat. It's rendered fat. It's lard, in a sense. But yeah, you wouldn't think of it in those terms when you're talking about it as soap for cleaning. But you might talk about it when you're talking about making rocket fuel or something, because it has, potential, energy potential to be released in its, fat molecules. I don't know, whatever. So anyway, our model is simplistic usually, even though we're capable of imagining any level of detail or any level of no detail of cartoon. We can do it. We can go both ways. We can simplify and then we can take things and understand them not just for what they are, but for all the ways they're connected. I could talk about soap and then talk about all the people who ever washed their big toe, and I mean, you could expand the conversation or the thought, or you can narrow it. So we can both do both things. And the idea is that we would have a model. If you're a smart person, the idea is that you're trying to model it to gain the significance and to get the significant parts technically correct and of sufficient detail. And that's sort of that should be, in my opinion, the ambition of somebody who's going to call themselves intelligent or a philosopher. And the last thing you're going to do is start talking about poetry if you're going to take philosophy seriously, because poetry is automatically distraction. It's automatically something triggering emotions. So this is another conversation that is connected in the sense that Anna Kontavad and Piro chimed in on this, that there's more to it, that somehow our emotions should be doing some of this thinking thing, or somehow emotions are the thing that causes thoughts, when logically I think you can know your thoughts trigger emotions based on what you connect things to. As I've pointed out before, I mean, it's not erroneous that the color red is seen by most people as aggressive or threatening and all that stuff, because red is the color of fire and it's the color of blood. So these are rational connections. And then we see red fire engines, and we see red flashing lights and red stop signs, and and so it's a conditioned response emotionally, but we know that it came from somewhere. And all of our emotional reactions come from somewhere in terms of how we interact with our vocabulary. So I sort of brought this up in a little bit in the conversation with Glenos, that like some words for me are trigger words, and for other people they don't have the same triggers because they're not thinking of the word the same way. So I can even say the word life. For most people it's I've said this before, but you could write the words out of fluffy clouds with little butterflies, and this is how they think of the word life. When no, the real what life is death often, and brutal death. And so you could make it out of knives and claws, and that would be the more appropriate or more accurate description of the mechanism. And the same is like with the word evolution for me. The word evolution, as I maturated into understanding it, it was never a happy word, and it always had a little bit of the negativeness of this whole idea of the winner and the loser. I didn't like the idea of the losers. And the more I grew into understanding what evolution does, the way it just uses us like guinea pigs to refine a little piece of DNA on a molecule, that this is insidious, and this is a word that I can associate with Mengelesque kind of torture and torment and nastiness. So it's not a word where you say evolution like it's oh yeah, that's a great way of refining organisms. No, it's this brutal, horrid, unyieldingly nasty and unfair, and deserve has nothing to do with it, and all that kind of crap. It's a draconianly Freddy's nightmare kind of mechanism. It's gladiator war. It's the Colosseum. It's feeding the Christians to the lions. There's nothing to dignify in it. It's a bullfight. It's just nasty all the way down. So see, this is what makes us understand what we understand is these models. So how I model the word evolution, what images pop to mind. The bloody tree, not just a tree, but one that has blood dripping from it, that kind of thing. So yes, our emotions get connected because we understand, some of us will interpret things and symbolize them and connect them to horrible things that happen to people and to others and that have happened to ourselves, and we'll associate those things with those probabilities and with those possibilities, and then our emotions are stimulated. But our emotions don't do the thinking. The thinking is done by the symbols being rationally tied to each other, and by us having the discipline to say, what's the truth? I know what I would like the truth to be, but what is the actual truth? Can I make an argument for what's being proposed? And I would argue that most people are arguing that 2 plus 2 equals 3 when it's clear that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And they're cheating. They're cutting corners off of 2's to turn them into 1's, so then they can say it's 3, and it's not. There's no pan anything. There's no... the universe isn't a plaything or a magical thing. It really isn't anything like Disneyland, the universe. It doesn't do things for admirable purposes or uplifting or... no, it doesn't do any of that. We're biological organisms created to be not any different than a crocodile, to survive in an environment. And the thing that quite obviously makes us seem like we're intended to do something better is merely the accidental consequence of having the intelligence to rise above it. As the point is to rise above our nature, Mr. Walnut. Go back to the African Queen. I mean, this is what intelligence does for you. It lets you rise above the maze and see the price being paid, to see the equations that are being, what's being exchanged, and to obviously understand those exchanges to be stupid. And I've used lots of metaphors, the Frankenstein analogy, or the drunk driver, or the drawing straws, or the tormenting one person to have your fun kind of thing, the tying somebody, the victim, to the back bumper and dragging him down the highway, as you go off to the 7-Eleven to get a Slurpee. The obvious impositions that are part of this bargain, and the fact that people keep trying to evade responsibility for that, like the Piros who say, the sperm made my kids. I didn't do it. The sperm did it. That kind of evasion of the fact that we are in control intellectually. We're watching ourselves interact in the world. We can see ourselves commit trespasses. We can see ourselves act out of selfishness. No need to bullshit. Yes, there's a need to say, I have to make some concessions to my biology, but there's no, that's not an excuse to make an excuse, to just say anything I do is okay because I'm determined and nature did it, and that's just too lame an excuse. Nature doesn't make you a taker or a rapist. You're having the capacity to know it's wrong and ignoring that, not paying attention when your brain is telling you you can do better. That's the bullshit. The rationalizations to bend the story into a Three Bear story, into a Goldilocks story, into some fantasy story where you've changed the fundamental rules to create some reason to think you're going somewhere, when you're just going to end up playing again. It's all Shakespearean plays over and over and over again. It's the same formula. The drama is all made out of the same crap. It's formula. Like every movie that's made is a formula. They sit there and engineer the formula. Oh, we need a love interest, and we need an underdog character, and well, just to make it authentic, we need to kill one of the good guys, at least one of them, and then we need to, but it's formula, and you're just being played by that. And if you pretend that there's something else going on in your brain, that it's something other than a formula, that's almost part of the formula of the meme of escapism and denial, is denying the Borg you're in. To talk as if the other is the Borg, when the Borg you're trying to defend, the Borg you're trying to protect from the Borg isn't any less Borg. You haven't got any of this free stuff. You haven't got any of this. You're not living for anything more real than the stupid Borgers. It's Borg all the way down. Being a slave to nature is Borg as you can get, in the sense that it's the dumbest, crudest, simplest Borg. It's just as ugly a Borg as ugly can be, in that it's the lean-to of houses, is the nature. So when you resort to nature, you're just resorting to, you haven't even tried to disguise the fact that you're just being a sycophant to the Borg. Something like that. So, Antikontovid's contribution is, as all of his contributions to me, frankly, I can't. He keeps going back to some stupid cave analogy and being overwhelmed by seeing the truth or something, and it kills you. And so somehow you have to do it in some fake way, so it doesn't kill you, but that somehow you really are doing the truth thing, which sounds like rubbish. So apparently if you do some tantra meditating bibble babble, then you'll be accessing the truth in a form that doesn't kill you, but that's really honest. I don't think so. I don't think any of that crap has anything to do with being honest. This feeling yourself, playing with your own nipples, isn't, that isn't the truth. So it's not the truth in the context of a bigger picture of the game is about more than how you feel the game, or how strong you are, how able to fight the war you are. It's about the value of the war. It's about the value of your contribution. So Antikontovid extracts from all conversation any implication that the objective here isn't to find what works for you. The objective is to find what works, in the sense that the world is better for your existence. That's the objective. The objective is to improve the place, not to leave it in disrepair, not to degrade performance, not to take from the sentient life that exists on the planet, not to enslave it, not to torment it, not to cause it any unnecessary harm. First, do no harm. That should be a mantra, not just for a doctor, but for anyone doing anything. First, don't catastrophically fuck up. And when you negate risk and pretend you have super meditative powers that will somehow enable you to survive, perhaps killing your own kids, that's not winning. Surviving it, finding some rationalization to say, well, it's just the way it is, the sperm killed her or him, that's not winning. That's failure. And it's certainly rational failure. Certainly not logical. And so as soon as people start saying you need to do this emotional thing, to do philosophy, no, that's just a symptom. Emotions are a symptom. They can't be a cause. All that has to be acknowledged is that we feel. And some feelings are more preventable than others. We don't have to hysterically react. We don't have to overreact. But by definition, because we're conditioned organisms, some of that's not going to be preventable. Some people are going to faint at the sight of blood. It's not their fault. It's not that they made a logical mistake. It's that these symbolic representations are getting to a place in their brain that you were able to separate or disconnect from. So you're just not as vulnerable. But philosophy should be neither one of those two things. Philosophy shouldn't be reacting to the fact that you faint and therefore that means it's wrong or it's bad because it causes you to faint. That shouldn't decide the truth. But neither should the fact that you've disconnected yourself from anything that makes you vulnerable, and therefore all philosophy, we can negate anything being a real harm in the world because you keep saying, what's in it for me? Or how does it hurt me? I didn't feel anything. I mean, from my perspective as a non-contributor in World War II, yeah, do a million of them because I didn't feel a thing. Vietnam, I didn't feel a thing. You could just keep doing everything over and over if the attitude's going to be, it only matters whether or not I got emotionally upset. I had a feeling. That's not philosophy. But it is philosophy to acknowledge that the pain that's going to be likely in circumstances like watching your children die of cancer or something, or even your parents, or anyone you care about, your wife, your husband, your lover, those traumas are probabilistically going to be significant and unavoidable, and they can be part of the calculation of the performance of a life in saying that it's not acceptable to have to endure those kind of things and find some way to survive them. We shouldn't have to be survivors. And if we're surviving by negating or perverting or denying the truth, then that's even more bad on us. Alright, it seems like quite a sermon. So sorry, but that's what it turned into. But anyway, yeah, just a lot of characters who are... I'm just very particular about how things are said and what people say, and I just am. And so that goes back to the Snake Plissken's thing, because I did want to... I don't know if I want to make a full video, and especially on the subject of this whole gender thing, but he did some response video, doing this idiotic thing of arguing with this idea of pronouns, that people want to have, they don't want to be called a Mr. or a Mrs., and so they'll pick something of their own to identify themselves. And he went to this back to nature argument of saying, well, there's only two genders, newsflash, as if for many people now, the word gender doesn't mean explicitly your physical hardware. It means, your gender means your emotions and your mannerisms and a way of living that you find comfortable. And that's part of what's called gender. Because we don't have another word for it. I mean, you can't call it sex because it's really not about sex. And so people use the word gender to describe in a more open way, a broader way, qualities of, like women have certain Venus qualities and the males have the certain Martian qualities. That kind of idea, warm and cold and hard and soft and blah blah blah. And so the word is that. That's what gender really means. So, you know, and what annoys me, I mean, it's just kind of annoying to have this conversation with people, but, you know, you can imagine that, you know, if somebody will, you know, as a male who enjoys his penis, regardless of my gender orientation, you know, whether I'm passive or aggressive, or whether I'm exclusive or not, whatever I'm, whatever the orientation, I can't think of the right word for it. But let's just, you know, let's just say I have the generic functioning parts anyway. Even if I didn't use them in a male way, they work. So that many of these people, they have these male parts and they don't work, and I can't even imagine how, you know, how difficult it would be to understand living with a penis that didn't do the penis stuff, you know, in any kind of useful way. And then they go to the point of actually having these parts removed. So my point is, as a male who likes my penis, I would find it really difficult to imagine life without it. And these people obviously have such a desire to escape this pigeonhole of their hardware that they would actually have these things cut off. And I'm just saying, you know, if you can't give the person a pronoun for that, then you're just being a petty cunt. I mean, fuck you, Snake Plisskenus. If you're that small-minded a little prick, you got nothing else to worry about in your life than sitting there and acknowledging that somebody else doesn't want to be what you want to pigeonhole them into being? I mean, fuck you, cunt. I mean, this isn't any better than some asshole telling a socialist, I'm going to call you a communist. Because, see, it fits these buttons, and that's the button I'm pressing. There's only two things in the world, capitalist and communist. There's only two things, Republican and Democrat. I mean, that's just fucking tiny-minded. So, yeah, you're a profound disappointment to do it on a subject where it's obvious that these people have to go through a rather traumatic change in their life. They have to deny, in a sense, their physical thing, their external, all the stuff about them. They have to, and they don't like it. And you can't appreciate how bad it would be if you didn't like your physical body, and you didn't like this, and you can't understand. You can't offer that person a little bit of compassion. That might be, you called him a fluffer, or, you know, a BFFF, or you can't stand a pronoun. A pronoun's a crisis for you. I just don't understand you cunts. I mean, you know, nobody's asking you to get in the jacuzzi with them, you stupid ass. And this is the same asshole who makes an argument that somebody who has transitioned shouldn't tell a person they're going to have potentially have intimacy with. And I suppose that's fine if everybody agrees that you're just having sex once and you'll never talk to each other again and blah 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 blah. But I mean, what's the practicality of that deception? What purpose does it serve if you're going to have anything called a genuine relationship with another human being? I don't know. I would rather be informed. I would like to give informed consent. You know, I think those kinds of surprises are bullshit. That's playing a game. That's playing me. That's not fairly interacting with me. That's certainly not loving me. It's certainly not treating me as anything but an object. If, you know, you're going to lie. I mean, fuck that. So yeah, so his opinions are, in my opinion, conflicting, and so anyway, he kept using this argument from nature, which just pissed me off too, because there's so many things he said. I brought it up in another video, but this one, you know, he's talking about incest and you know, the need to spread genes, and that's not a settled bit of science. You know, this idea that you know, incest is a crisis when it's repeated, but having a small gene pool is what made all of the evolution that ever took place. I mean, by Gould's theory of punctuated equilibrium, it's the small populations that are inbreeding that tend to be able to do this dramatic advancement in their physical form. And then you go back into the gene pool to get some of the stuff you lost back again. But you can sort of understand it, that say you could have a kid and he's immune to all allergens. Well, the problem is if he's reproducing in a gene pool that isn't immune to all allergens, his new improved genes are going to end up becoming recessive and maybe will be wiped out altogether when they have to be dampened into the general population. So unless there is some ability for him to maybe reproduce with a cousin who has half of the genes he has, that are already leading up to that immunity, it's a trait you could lose. So it's not a clear-cut incest always bad, or any kind of some lack of gene diversity always bad. It's not always bad. So I just wanted to point that out without having to make a whole video on this subject. But I just don't, an argument from nature on this subject of gender dysphoria or dysmorphia or whatever you want to call it is so unuseful in the first place. I mean, it's fallacy from argument from nature. We're not owned by physical hardware, and physical hardware doesn't necessarily always work the same for all people. It isn't the same hardware, so it makes the argument even more useless. But yeah, to add insult to the injury of the inappropriate argument is the fact that I don't even think he's making an accurate from nature argument. So anyway, that's enough of that. There's other bigger and better subjects and such. But anyway, enough of the video. I think it was enough. So till next time, try to get this, edit this together. I do have to amplify this camera. I like this camera because it's this smaller frame, so it's better for, it goes into the editor much better. But yes, this camera doesn't record the audio very loud, so that's a problem. But hopefully all that will be overcome, and the video will be of it will be of sufficient quality for you to enjoyably watch this presentation of stuff and whatnot. So I think that's enough. That's enough.